All right, it's time to talk basketball. Christmas Day is behind us. The Christmas games are behind us. So week 10 is behind us. And Steve has some random thoughts. I'm Jose Salviati, editor at thebeachbasket.net. He's Steve Purciello, longtime educator, vice principal, high school basketball coach, athletic director. He's also the host of Celtic Chalk Talk. Celtic Chalk Talk is a pod dedicated to the latest news and opinions surrounding the Boston Celtics from a lifelong fan, Steve. That pod will drop new episodes every Monday, but this, again, is the Shotclock pod, the best 24 minutes of NBA random thoughts online anywhere. This podcast is born out of the content of Steve's 13 Rules random NBA thoughts articles, which he publishes weekly. Steve and I have exactly 24 minutes to discuss what's on his mind around the NBA. Today, we'll discuss his latest 13 Rules random NBA thoughts article, where he shares his random thoughts after week 10 of the 2025-26 NBA season, which included the Christmas games that we just talked about, and that we will be talking about two of those today. Steve, are you ready?
Ready.
All right, let's start the timer. All right, timer is on. Let's start with a possible changing of the guard in Atlanta. Trae Young has been the face of that franchise since he was drafted, honestly, but who is the Hawks' new best player?
Jalen Johnson. He's taken off. He's an all-star easily, and he's probably going to be all-NBA, one of the three teams. Just take a look at it. He's averaging 28, 10, and 8, and shooting 37%, over 37% from three over the season. So it's pretty good. That's a great season. When you look at it, it's almost a triple-double. So he's done well, and more importantly, the Hawks, without Trae Johnson, have done much better than with him. They lost last night in a tough game to the Knicks, but they're, I believe, 2-9 with him and something around 13-9 without him. So if you're the Hawks, I don't know what his market is. That's a great question. But it's time to think about dealing him. If you watch the end of the Knicks game last night, each time down, the Knicks were trying to get Trae Young on the ball. And it worked sometimes. And naturally, obviously, if they're going at him, that means he doesn't defend as well as everybody else. And that's another problem for the Hawks because they're all over the place in how they play. One night they're getting blown out, the next night they're playing well. And then B, how they defend. Their numbers go all over the place when you study game by game. So the Hawks are a team that, and Quinn Snyder came in with a good reputation, but that hasn't gotten better either. What do you do when you're in that situation? You got to make change. And the obvious change here is Trae Young. Not even talking about the coaching situation. And I think Quinn Snyder's got a long contract. He'll be there. But I think it's more importantly done that they think about dealing Trae Young, which was interesting also last night at the end, in the last minute or two. They've had Nickel Walker, who's the backup point guard, but he's scoring about 20 points a game with it when Trae was out. But they had him on the court with Trae as well as Dyson Daniels. So they were going three guards, and they were using Walker. And Walker was a sequence with about 40 seconds left, a 1-point game. The Knicks were winning. Brunson, who was on fire at that point, came across half court, and Walker picked his pocket and had a layup, which put the Hawks ahead. And if anything can exemplify the situation where Walker's value might be more to this team than Trae Young, that would do it. They've got some decisions to make. And of course, the salary, I don't think they want to pay that salary anymore. Obviously, the only thing left to do is think about what could we get for this guy?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Nickeil Alexander-Walker. You called him out in your article as well, averaging 20.3 points per game. Clearly, they've got somebody who can fill in that gap if they have to move on from Trae, and it looks like now might be the right time. In this show over the years, you've done a great job of introducing us and me to players I hadn't heard of. And I follow the NBA, but there's always these little nuggets out there, and you call them out. This week, though, you introduced us and me to a coach. Who's the next head guy? Tell us about him.
First of all, you have to be retired to be able to have the time to waste watching or figuring this all out. But Jordy Fernandez did a pretty good job with the Nets last year. But you really have to sit down and realize this year, they started the season 0-7, and they had they had draft picks all over the place, and he had to infuse a new team. Since then, they've gone, I believe, 10-12. And in the course of that, they've beaten Boston, Toronto, Philly, and last night, Minnesota. So they're real. He's taken Michael Porter, and he's a star, and he's infused the young around him, and they've just taken off. And by the way, the developing of Michael Porter is really something that's significant because don't forget, Denver traded him for Cam Johnson. Everybody thought that Cam Johnson's the better player. Well, Porter just needed the chance to step out and show people what he can do. And he's done that. So it's really interesting, but he's also able to take guys like Claxton, and he's got a rookie, and I'll get the name wrong, but Demon, or Igor, I believe Demon, who was their first round pick. And he can shoot, and he can play, and he looks like he's about 15, but he can play, and he's going to get better. And what's interesting, Fernandez, when you watch the Nets, he will pull these guys if they're not doing exactly what he says. And that's a throwback. In the NBA today, coaches always acquiesce to their players. But what he's done last year, he did a nice job with that team. They were tanking, but he kept winning, which hurt them in the draft. But he coaches to win. And again, last night, going up in Minnesota and beating them, it says something about the job he's doing. As the team gets more talented, he will become one of the best coaches in the league, I would think, because he's got all the makings for it.
That's crazy. And it really does speak to something that we've seen happening as NBA fans over the course of the last decade, maybe decades. And that's the internationalization of the game. We just talked about a Spanish coach. You brought up a Russian player in Igor Demon. The best player in the NBA is arguably Serbian in Nikola Jokic. And the most exciting player right now is arguably from France in Victor Wembanyama. It's wild, isn't it?
You opened up something that's very interesting. The Europeans, when they train younger players, they work more on fundamentals. In the United States, people handpick this talent, put in a youth team together, and they play games. So those habits that aren't good aren't as well worked out in the U.S., where in other countries, they do a good job with that. And I'm going to use Hugo Gonzalez with Boston. He's 19 years old. Defensively, he's outstanding. He's got a great motor. But more importantly, he's ready to play. A lot of the American 19-year-olds take time to assimilate into the game.
Yeah.
So I think the Europeans are onto something, and I don't think the Americans are going to change the way they do things, which might mean that the U.S. dominating in the Olympics and all might be over or coming to an end. You got to look at right off the bat, you got to look at what France is going to have when Wembanyama. And so right away, you're realizing things are quickly or rapidly going to change.
Yeah, it's crazy looking back at it now. It's been a slow evolution of the game, but the European great players are here to stay. Let's take a look back at the Christmas Day games, right? We had some really good ones. You called out the Cavs and the Knicks. That game meant something to both teams. You wrote about it in your article. We'll link it below. But what did the end result tell us about both teams?
The Cavs came into the game winning 2 straight. And it looked like they were getting their act back together.
Yeah.
And this would be a turning point game for them. They led much of the game.
Right.
However, the Knicks beat him down the stretch and won the game. Now, for the Cavs, they were playing in New York. That's always difficult. But for the Cavs, if they were thinking that this was going to be the turning point or they can turn it up now and start winning, they lost that game. And that had to be a tough thing. And last night they went out and hammered by Houston. So it tells you something where they are, and it doesn't appear that they're getting better. Yeah. As for the Knicks, they lost to Minnesota. They didn't play. A couple guys, Anunoby, I believe Hart got hurt. Brunson didn't play. They didn't play, but they lost the game. Now, you don't want to fall into that rut because they're going to be going on the road a lot more in the next couple of weeks. You don't want to fall into that rut. So they went out and they won. They won that game against Cleveland, and that was important. And last night they won another tough game against Atlanta. So they were able to right the ship. But Cleveland, as I said a few times, there's something wrong, and it's just not right, and so on. They even got Evan Mobley back, who was out for a while with the calf, and they played well for 3.5 quarters, just 45 minutes. But the last couple of minutes they did, and they got beat. And one other interesting thing in that game, and he's a great offensive rebounder, Mitchell Robinson. But in the fourth quarter, he in the last 6 minutes, I guess, he must have had 4 or 5 offensive rebounds that led to baskets for the Knicks in their comeback. Don't forget, the Knicks were down by over 10 with about 6 or 7 minutes left. So
Right.
Mitchell Robinson did it. But then, wait a minute, you have Jared Allen and you have Mobley. How come they're not rebounding down the stretch? And what's going wrong here? That's a problem. Now, last night they got hammered by Houston, and Kenny Atkinson more or less said after the game, we just weren't ready. It just, there's no urgency now. When is the urgency going to be there?
Yeah, when we talk about the Cavs, it's almost hard to remember how good they were at the start of last season. They looked dominant, and then since that phenomenal start and petering out in the playoffs, they've been a different team. It's like they're trying to find themselves again.
If you watch them, a lot of times if you watch a team over the year, you'll see, oh my God, they're winning all these 1-point or 2-point games. And this is going to be a magical year. That's what last year until the playoffs came around. This year, the Knicks are the magical team, right? And they're winning games, just pulling games out and winning some tough games and 1-point games. And when that happens, you almost think, is this a magical year for them?
NBA Cup champion New York Knicks. Let's not take that away from them.
Hope they hang that banner not as high as what they Go ahead.
Let's stay on the Christmas Day games. This was also a very interesting one. And we'll talk so much about the game, but more the outcome and what it tells us. The teams everyone talks about when we talk about the teams that could really challenge the Thunder in the West are the Nuggets and the Rockets. Those are the ones that generally people spit out, right? With understandably good reason. But after the Christmas Day game and 3 wins in a row against the Thunder, we got to add the Spurs to that list, don't we? They're for real.
Oh, yeah, they beat OKC 3 times, 2 weeks, and they blew them out the other day in Oklahoma. So it's saying a lot. It does is a bigger effect, though. It makes other teams that are contenders say, wait a minute, they might have been more reluctant a while back, but now they're looking at this and saying, wait a minute, maybe they can be had. And let's think about the trade, and we'll talk about that in a second. And as for Victor Wembanyama, keep in mind, this is only his 3rd year in the NBA. He's, 22 or 21 or whatever. He's going to, if San Antonio continues putting good people around him, they're going to be, at least now, we know somebody will compete with Oklahoma over the next Oklahoma City over the next couple of years to win it. One more piece to it that was interesting, I found interesting. In the game, Oklahoma never decided to put 2 things I saw. They never decided to put their 7-foot guy on Wemby. And that was interesting. The other thing I saw was, and Lou Dort is a very good defender.
Sure.
He was getting eaten alive. He couldn't handle the quickness of a Harper or Castles. And Harper has only played, 15 games this year and had that trouble. And by the way, I was talking about Holmgren when I said the 7-footer. Why didn't they even take a shot? I know Wemby's bigger than him. He's bigger than everybody. But that's something that's very interesting, that they didn't do that. But also the quickness of, and Fox was another one that was beating them off the dribble. And that really was, because you always think about Oklahoma's outstanding defense. And Lou Dort, I always think he's one of the best guard defensive players in the game. And he was humbled, I guess, in that game. So there was a lot of interesting things that came out of it. And we'll see the ramifications over the next, 2 months with the trading deadline.
Yeah. Let's talk about it. You hinted at it. Now, all of a sudden, this team that started out like 28-1 or something, it wasn't that good, but they were phenomenal at coming out the gate. Now, all of a sudden, people are looking, right? Teams that, we talked about the Rockets, you talked about the Nuggets, but maybe other teams in the West, maybe the Lakers. I can't think of another one off the top of my head. But these guys are all looking at these guys and go, yeah, like you said, maybe they're gettable. Maybe we're a player or two away. So you said that will likely drive the trade deadline and turn into more of a seller's market. What do you envision? What do you see?
Well, when you think about it, you got Detroit. They need a shooter, as we talked last week. He's always on the prowl for a star. And you know what? We'll talk about that with Adebayo in a few minutes. But you have the Lakers. We'll talk about that in a few minutes, too.
Indeed.
Denver, Minnesota, and the Knicks are all knocking on the door, as well as San Antonio. But I think they might feel fine with what they have. But the point being, each of them some might need a big time player. And I also Boston. I don't know if I mentioned, or some of them just might need a good role player to do certain things. When you look at Boston, I just brought them into it. If Tatum, and it's all predicated on if Tatum comes back.
Sure.
If he comes back, well, you're close. You're close, especially in the East. You're close. And if he comes back 75% of what he is, pretty good. There's a whole bunch of teams here that now are looking at it. If we take the shot with whomever, we have a chance. Miami, using them for an example, they might be thinking, let's see now, we might be able to put a package together and get, if Giannis is on the market, we might be able to put something together that might be workable and we'll still have something left to win with. So there's a lot of things going on right now that change a lot of GM's thoughts, because a lot of them were going to hold themselves and not trade away big trades that they didn't think they could win the whole thing. So that's what San Antonio's three wins have done for the rest of the league.
Yeah, it's funny how three wins reverberate, right? The ripple effect and how it impacts everything, because now people are looking at the Thunder and go, maybe we got a chance. But we'll see. I do think it's a small chance. If it's a chance for anybody outside of San Antonio, though, that team remains dominant. Let's talk about, this is a bit of a bombshell for me when I read your article, because it was out of my radar. It is a team in the East. I don't follow the East as well as I follow the West. But you mentioned that Bam Adebayo's time in Miami might be coming to an end. What's that about?
That's just a prediction. I always thought Bam was the next big man that they keep forever and all that, and he dies a Heat guy and all that. But when you start to look at it, he's starting to get hurt a little bit, which means he's getting a little older. But also, in the last 4 games, he hasn't shot 13.7%, 13.8, whatever, but not nearly as well. And then now Khalil Ware is starting to play well. It's okay. Now, Bam has got value. He can defend, and he's a better scorer than what he's shown in the last few weeks. But now you start thinking about it. If we put Bam and Hero and a draft pick or two, what could we get? And now if you take that, and all of a sudden you have Norman Powell, let's say use Giannis as the person. You got Norman Powell, Giannis, Khalil Ware, and Wiggins, and Davion Mitchell running the show. It gets a little interesting, and you become very dangerous if Giannis is healthy. But you now have moved into the upper echelon where you can possibly beat anybody in the East. And if you get to the finals, who knows? So it kind of changes. And I don't know if Riley would do that. And by doing that, I mean trading Bam, but it's the logical thing to do right now. By the way, Hero's from Wisconsin. He'd be going home in its own way, too. And I'm sure Milwaukee, if they're going to deal him, getting a pretty good scorer from their area wouldn't hurt.
Yeah, it's a weird thought, right? This is a guy who was drafted by the Heat, spent his entire career at the Heat, and you just, at least for me, it came out of nowhere. But when you start looking at it and looking at what's possible, yeah, that he could really turn a corner here. This trade deadline, like every trade deadline, it could be a bust. It could be a whole lot of talk and a whole lot of nothing, or it could be some really big names, Trae Young, Giannis, and others moving. Very interesting. Let's move from the East to the West. A team we've talked a little bit about on this show in the year that we've been doing it, and that's the Los Angeles Lakers. They are a good offensive team, but defense wins championships. It doesn't look like the Lakers have got that memo. What's going on with a team that started really well and has now hit the skids a little bit?
It's your turn to talk. Tell me what's going on.
I think the cream rises to the top, right? It's two things here. And again, I've said this before here. Phil Jackson has always said, well, I'll know by Thanksgiving who I've got. And at the Thanksgiving trade deadline, but the line of demarcation, the Lakers look good. Austin Reeves has made a jump. Luka Doncic is being MVP caliber Luka. And LeBron he's settled into that complementary role. Things look good. But you could tell this is a team that has some real holes, right? They have a center that's up and down. Marcus Smart is not the Marcus Smart of the Celtics era. So they don't really have a defensive stopper. They were playing good teams. They weren't playing really great teams. So it all looked to be a little bit of a mirage. And now, you pull back the cover and you can see that they've got some limitations. This is not a good defensive team. You called it out in your article, 121.4 points per game over the last 10. In that stretch, they're 4-6. Defense wins championships. The Lakers just are not a good defensive team.
Go back to something I talked about in one of the previous weeks. When teams are past their peak in their championship, they begin to just grab players. And oftentimes they don't quite fit with what you need. And that's what the Lakers have been doing now. They've been pulling out straws and hoping that this will get us there. But they're not building a true organic type team. And that's where I think the Lakers are hurting. I also think the transition from LeBron to no LeBron, which is going on this year.
Sure.
I think that the piece to that, I don't think LeBron's really buying into him leaving. And I think it's just not working the way they play ball. LeBron can't be expected to be the defender he was and give it 35 minutes doing everything. Luka is not a defender, and Austin Reeves is not a defender. So now the old rule is two bad defenders on the court are going to kill you. 3, forget it, and you've got a problem. And somebody just made a statement. I'm trying to remember who it was. It's very interesting when you think about it. They said that Luka, without the ball, can't play. He doesn't make anybody better. He's got to have the ball in his hands. It's a very interesting statement. I'm trying to remember who made the statement, but it's a very interesting statement that goes with it. And I think what it shows you is when a team's losing, everybody finds fault with everybody. That's, to me, Luka, I don't want the ball in his hands at the end of the game if I'm rooting for the other team. If I'm rooting for the Lakers, which probably will never happen in this life. But if I'm rooting for the Lakers, I want the ball in Luka's hand. So it's really interesting. And then you're forgetting Austin Reeves, who's a good player, great offensive player. He's just over on the side now. We're not even talking about him. He's hurt, but we're not even bringing him into it. So it's really not a great situation for them. And I feel for J.J. Redick, who appears to be a pretty good coach. Again, you need pieces. And if you don't have them, you don't win. And I guess LeBron isn't running the front office anymore, so he can't make any trades.
Which is a good thing. Sam Mitchell, former NBA coach, said of Luka, he can't play basketball without the ball. He doesn't cut. He doesn't move. He doesn't set screens. So it was Sam Mitchell that said that. Very interesting. So let me ask you a hypothetical as we wind this down, because we have another shot clock violation on our record. You heard the shot clock go off. But I got to ask you, years down the road, it won't be this year. Who knows, maybe. Lakers versus the Knicks in the NBA Finals. Who are you rooting for?
It probably would be the first time in 40 years that I'll start watching the Stanley Cup Finals. That would probably happen because they don't appeal to me. Actually, in all seriousness, I guess you always watch what your enemy's doing, but try to catch as many Laker games. They're later for me. I'm on the East Coast, but I'll try to catch them, and I'll try to catch the Knicks. I can catch whenever I can. So I'll watch those games more intently with curiosity, and so I would watch it and probably just watch basketball and not. And it's hard to watch something when you're not really rooting, because if you have a rooting interest, you're really concentrating on what's going on out there.
All right. So I tried to get it out of you that you would root for the Lakers, but it's not happening.
You know what? Just it's again. I guess we consider the Lakers with that big tournament win a couple of years ago.
Sure.
That makes 18, like Boston, right? So
right.
yeah. So I guess you have to root for the Lakers.
I got it out of him. And on that note, we're going to move on. That's it. Our time is up. You heard the clock go off. Another shot clock violation on our record. But thank you for listening. Thanks for watching. Make sure to read Steve's entire 13 Rules Reddit NBA Thoughts article. We will link it wherever you are watching or listening to the show today. And of course, please subscribe, comment, follow. All that means a lot. It means everything to us, and we're grateful for it. Join us next week for more NBA Random Thoughts as we recap Week 11 in 2026, the first week of 2026. We'll talk then. Thanks, Steve.